Hello, welcome to episode 2 of my Dayz modding series. In today's video, I'll be giving you a brief overview of the mod's file structure and give you a template that you can work off for future projects. I'm Dr. Borg. Let's get started. So before we get started, actually, I want to mention I'm creating a Github Wiki that I'm going to be posting links and uploading files to over the course of this series. So as you can see here, I've got the first and second episodes. I'm going to put all the information in here and then link it into the YouTube video, and then you guys can just come here and grab whatever you need off the page. But other than that, we can actually get started now. Okay, so one of the things that I had trouble with when I first got into this, and it kind of still eludes me a little bit, but we're figuring it out, is just how mod structure works. When you pack a mod or you rewrite, a script, or you retexture something, there's certain things you got to have in the mod folder when you pack it for it to work properly. And I just want to kind of go over those things with you so you can have some expectations for things you need to look for when you're building your own mods. So I've created this mod template folder, and inside it there's a couple other folders and a couple files in here as well. So let's go ahead and go through those. So the first thing here is the data folder. Any models or PAA texture files or RV mats or anything like that that you upload, you're going to put in this data file, and that's where they're going to stay, and you're going to point to them using this config file. So this config file, well, actually we'll come back to that. Let's go ahead and talk about the scripts. So the scripts folder is going to be C files that you create that essentially bind classes together. I don't know if I'm really saying that right. This is not really a language that I'm really familiar with. I don't really know exactly how it works, if you want me to be honest, but I know how to use it, if that makes sense. And one thing nobody told me when I first got started was that inside this scripts folder, you have to define these certain other folders, such as the world folder, the game folder, and the mission folder. And these correspond to this P drive that we had set up in the previous video. When you go into P drive and you go to scripts, these three folders here, this is what it corresponds to for the vanilla files. So any script that you might write that modifies any file inside of these have to be in the correct folder inside your mod folder. Anyway, back to our folder. So inside that, you have these three folders, and within those folders, you don't have to create any other folders. Any files that you put inside these folders will be read, and they will work just fine. Some people do like to create additional folders to organize things a little bit better, especially if you're doing large mods that have multiple different scripts that you want to keep separate. For readability purposes, you may want to separate those into their separate folders. An example of that is like this. So inside of the vanilla Dayz worlds folder, you have a bunch of folders, and within those folders, you have a bunch of folders. And so you can kind of see how it's organized. Like I said, you can, if you would like to, organize them based on the folder, that you're modifying the script inside of, so you can keep them more organized, but you don't have to. And then so within our scripts folder, we have a C file, and best as I can tell, it doesn't matter what you name this file, it still works the same. But essentially what you're going to put in this C file is going to look like this here. Let me zoom this in for you real quick. Okay, so this is essentially what it's going to look like. So I'm going to do my best to explain this the best that I understand it. So when you create a custom texture, for instance, you're going to be creating a new class, and this is going to be the class name of your new texture. In this instance, we're doing a texture of a bomber jacket. So we just call it template bomber jacket, and that's fine, but this is going to define what our item is going to be called in game. So the other part to this, the way this works is this colon here is going to extend an existing class, and that class being the bomber jacket underscore black class. Now, some items in the game have color bases. So for instance, the bomber jacket has a color base, which I believe is just bomber jacket underscore color base. And then it has several variations, such as black and blue and red, for instance, just some other colors that it may come in. Not every item has this, but some items do. So when we extend the class, essentially what we're doing is just creating a copy of it with a different name, and it's going to borrow the attributes from that class. And then we need the open and closed squigglies with a semicolon after it to round it off. Now, some items or some things that you modify, you will put stuff between these, but for this instance, it's not something we're going to have to worry about. The rest of our configuration is going to be in our config file. So the config file is really an important thing that it's not hard to understand once you understand it, but looking at it first is going to be a little bit strange. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see this a little bit more. Okay, so here is our config file. And this is kind of broken up in some separate sections that will be modified based on what you're trying to change. So this first section, the CFG patches, what this is going to do is allow us to name our class. Again, typically going to make this the same thing that you have here, but you don't have to, because if you're making a mod that changes multiple things, maybe you want to have it something more general, like your initials underscore mod pack, or something that defines what you're doing. But for now, we'll just leave it as add-on name. Okay, and then for this selection here, the required add-ons, certain things that you modify will need certain required add-ons to be defined, so that I guess the game knows what you need to have in order to be able to run the mod. So this next section here, the CFG mods, again, this is just going to be more information based, more information for your mod that's going to determine, what information is included with it when it's packed and different things like that. You have, your directory and your name, which is generally going to be the same as your class name. This class name also needs to be the same. Typically what I do is, since I have this template, we'll just highlight it, we'll change all occurrences and just change it all to the same value. And that's going to change a couple things going through here. Again, but you have different things you can change. You can do your credits and your author and things like that. And if somebody were to strip your mod apart, they would get to see this information and see who made it. So an important thing that will need to be defined is the dependencies. So you don't always need all three of these. It just depends on what files you're modifying. So most of what I have done is just modify things in this 4_world file. So for instance, with this is all I would need. I could delete these other two. Just make sure that if you only have one, you do not have the comma there, so that it has the correct syntax. And then these dependencies also correspond to these script modules. So the game script module, world, and mission script module. Again, I don't believe you need to have any of them that you don't need selected, but I've included all of them as a template. I don't believe it hurts you to have them in the config file. We'll just leave them in there for now. The important thing for most mods is going to reside in this CFG vehicles. This has been an interesting problem for me to try to figure out how to, circumvent. Like I said, I don't really know a lot about C or C++, so I just kind of had to look at a lot of different references to see how things were done. And I also had a lot of help in the Infusion Modders Discord to kind of figure this out. But essentially, anytime you extend a class in this one, you're going to have to also bring that class into your config file. As you see here, we have our class bomberjacket_black with a semicolon. And essentially what this is doing is just going to be defining the class that we're building off of. We'll define this, and it only needs to be defined once in case you're making multiple retextures or multiple modifications of the same class type. This only needs to be described once. And then in this section, we're going to do the same thing, but we will change it so that it's the class name that we decided in our C file. And then a little bit different than in our C file, we extended it using space colon space. But in our config file, we're going to do no space colon and then a space after, and then we're going to type in the class that we are extending, which should be the one that we defined previously right here. Okay, and then this next selection is a pretty generic one, but it should help you kind of understand what you need to do. So the scope here is going to define whether or not the item is going to be available in game. So scope 2 is default. That means it's going to be available. And I'm not 100% certain whether this needs to be defined since it is a part of the base class that we're modifying. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be defined. But to be on the safe side, we're going to define it anyways. This next option here, this hidden selections textures, is going to be important because this is where you're going to define where your new PAA textures are at. So some items just have one line that determine which texture it's going to be, and some items have multiple. Now these are all the same file, but I think it changes. For instance, this one could be the file that it looks like on a man character, this could be a woman character, and this one could be what it looks like when it's on the ground, if I understand it correctly. And I will show you quickly how we find these hidden selections for an item. So what we'll do is we'll go to scripts. We'll go to our files. We'll go to our Dayz tools, P drive, and then we'll go to DZ, which is going to have all of our textures and models files in it. And so for the bomber jacket, we're going to go to characters, and then we're going to go to tops, and then we're going to go to, we're going to just scroll down here, and this is the file we're looking for, the config file. This is going to be the config file for all of the tops in vanilla Dayz. We're going to open that up. So one thing I will mention just while we're sitting at the top of this, typically what I do when I look for the base class that we're going to be modifying, I'll find the required add-ons that's sitting at the top of the config file, such as this, and I'll add this to my config file up here at the top, just so that that's how we need to find those. I'm honestly not really sure. I've gotten away with just adding DZ_data to it before and it's worked, so I'm not really sure, but that's usually what I do. And then when we're on the config file for the Dayz vanilla tops, I'll just do a Control F to search and type in bomber jacket underscore, and then so here for instance is the color base. So this is the very base class where every other variation of colors gets its information from. And then if we just scroll down through here, you can see that it has all of the like the armor and different, information on how the jacket works and all the stats for it. And then once we get down to here, we'll see all the color variations. So black, brown, blue, gray, maroon. And if you notice, the only thing that these change is the texture. So these all are extended from the color base class. It's just where they get all of their details from, I guess. And then the only thing that they modify is the hidden selections textures, which is essentially all that we're doing as well. So our class that we make is going to look the same as this. So all we have to do is go ahead and just copy this, and then we'll come to our config and we'll hit paste. Now I've already pasted it, and you can delete the other variable, which was the visibility modifier. That's not something we need. We'll just keep the scope and the hidden selections textures. And then from there, all you're going to do is copy your path to your PAA file, which is going to be in your mod folder, which is going to be mod template for us, and then data. And so here I have this basic modification to the bomber jacket, and we're just going to copy his path, and then we're going to paste it in here so that it knows where we get the path from. Now, one thing you do need to know is that you don't have to define like this here. You don't have to define this. It's going to automatically assume that we're working out of your P drive. So all you need to define is the folder that we're working out of. So for instance, it's going to be the mod underscore template folder. So actually we can go ahead and just change this to mod underscore template. And now it's going to know where to pull that file. And one last thing we'll go over before we end the video, because I do want to keep this one short, is this. So in our Dayz tools, and I think this is pretty common for most people that make mods, what I like to do is create one file that I'm building the mod out of, that's going to have all of this information, the data and the scripts and everything. And then I'll create another folder with the same name, but we'll add an @ sign in the front of it. And then that's where we'll eventually build our add-on into. So for instance, you can see I've already made some add-ons. These are the actual add-ons that are getting uploaded to the workshop. They're already finished and keyed and everything. They've got the keys added to them. The other thing I like to do, and this may not be necessary, but I've just found that it's a little bit easier. I have my project extras folder. I'll also create a folder inside this one, and it's where I'll store like PNG files or anything that I may need to add, like textures or things that I want to copy paste. Anything that doesn't need to necessarily get packed into the file, but I may still need it if I want to go back and tweak things. Or saved GIMP files, for instance, we'll just put them in here so that we can have access to that stuff if we need it. And also, while I'm in here, the other thing I like to do is have a templates folder. So this templates folder has got like a template config file and different things that I can go in and look at so I can reference if I need to. You can see here I had the mod underscore template that we were building out. So I can always go back and look at those things if I forget how to do something. And it does make it a little bit easier if you get stuck. But I believe that's all we're going to do for the day. I hope this was helpful. I tried to keep it short, but I realized it's running a little bit long. So hopefully you got some valuable information out of this. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. If I don't know the answer to the question, I will do my best to find the answer for you. There may be mistakes I made in this video or things that I said incorrectly. Or things I just don't quite understand. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I'm a beginner to all this. I'm just doing my best to kind of help people that may want to get into this as well, but are having trouble finding the resources that they need. So if you know I made any of those mistakes, feel free to correct me down in the comments. That would be very helpful because I don't want to be wrong about anything, you know. I'm trying to learn just like the rest of us. But anyways, I'm Dr. Borg. Please have yourself a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.